And we'll go
coming out
to
swinging.
Romeo and Juliet, Act 2 chorus.
Go for
Take it away.
Now old the desire doth in his deathbed lie, and young affection gapes to be his heir. That fair for which love groaned for and would die, with tender Juliet matched, is now not fair. Now Romeo is beloved and loves again, alike bewitched by the charm of looks. But to his foe supposed he must complain, and she steal love's sweet bait from fearful hooks. Being held a foe, he may not have access to breathe such vows as lovers use to swear. And she as much in love, her means much less, to meet her new beloved anywhere. But passion lends them power, time means to meet, tempering extremities with extreme sweet.
That was beautiful.
Romeo's not in love with the Rosalie anymore. Did we ever talk about the revised version in the late 1600s, early 1700s, where they wrote her character out of the play?
I did not know that, though. I know Juliet's lines have been really heavily modified from version to version. So it makes sense they'd mess with Rosaline, too.
Yeah, they're have them both be virginal.
Yeah, so as said, it's about Rosalind at the beginning. Rosalind. I've seen it spelled with a D at the end as well. Rosalind. But regardless, Rosie. His desire for Rosalind is dead. His young affection is there. For Juliet. And now the next two lines, that fair for which love groaned for and would die with tender Juliet matched is now not fair. It's basically saying, compared to his love for Juliet, his love for Rosalind is like nothing. Like the love for Juliet dwarfs it entirely, which we could take literally, like that's literally true, or we could take it as like that's how Romeo feels because he's 16 and that's what love feels like when you're 16. The rest of this kind of goes through, they're both in love and they can't be together. That is the crux of it. But the next bit it brings up some old romantic poetry tropes. So it used to be that you would always, the hero in the couple would always have to complain to the lady about how hard it is to be apart from you because you are so lovely and I love you so much. If you picture the famous one is Lancelot and Guinevere, this courtly love, they can never be together. And he has to oh, I wish I could be with you so much. You are so pretty. It is so hard. But the issue here is that Romeo has to complain to his foe supposed. And foe supposed meaning like an assumed enemy. Like he's been told that Juliet is his enemy. But the truth is that he actually loves her.
Oh,
I know, it's tough times. And then she in turn also loves him. The next line, she steal love's sweet bait from fearful hooks. She's like a fish that is trying to get the sweet love off of the dangerous fish hook. So it's a very delicate situation we've got here.
I mean, if you've ever been fishing, they usually vanish.
It's true. But ideally it ends there with a couplet at the end. Passion might give them the power to meet and get over the extremities or difficulties. You can temper the difficulties with the extreme sweetness of love. So we will see if they manage to do that. But that's what we've got here. Kind of just a review of what we've learned so far. Romeo and Juliet are in love, and that sucks.
Exposition.
Really wants us to know that they are super in love.
So in love that they would die. And death comes up a couple times in the sonnet. Really.
Foreshadowing.
Spoilers there.
Spoilers, Mom.
There's not really too much to get into in this chorus as opposed to the first one.
Yeah, this one's just a really pretty exposition dump telling you what you've already seen and what you're about to see.
Mm-hmm.
Very pretty.
I do suspect that, because they do this between the acts, but this one feels much more functional than the first one of we are hiding the fact that people are changing their costumes backstage.
Yeah. It's kind of like that scene when they're walking to the party. It's like we already know everything that's in this scene, but we've got to wheel out the new set and change dresses and so on. So,
Which is kind of like when we started this, we were talking about how play production was a lot like TV production, at least before peak TV now, but of being very like driven by the production and workmanlike.
Yeah.
Like no modern playwright adds a scene just for the sake of having a scene break.
Well, there's even just the technical aspect of we can have a blackout. Like we can shut off lights in a way that's easier than they could. So like that can happen. We can have like little musical overtures in a dark room for 15 seconds while they change their outfits, but they couldn't really do that back then.
Yeah, back then I was like, yeah, okay.
Have you ever seen a stage show where they got the rotating stage?
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, that's
That was really good. When Dev and I went to see Wozzeck, they had a rotating stage for that. So they did the whole opera continuously without act breaks.
How does that work? They're just like running around the stage until the next scene, like.
So mounted on the stage is this large rotating platform on which they've constructed the sets. And then as the play progresses, they just rotate the stage around and they're assembling the next set behind the current one on the rotating bit. So it'll just rotate into the next set and they're just constantly having people coming out, changing the scenery.
That's kind of sick.
Must be nice to have the money for that.
Yeah, the Vienna State Opera, not exactly hard up for cash. I appreciate that this sonnet emphasizes to some extent that both of them just like how the other one looks. I mean, alike bewitched by the charm of looks. Very straightforward on that front.
So, yeah.
Shakespeare did not like writing about ugly people.
That's nice.
I mean, how many ugly people see on TV? TV ugly is real life perfectly acceptable.
This type of trope back in the day of narrating everything that was going on is really old fashioned because we don't do this anymore. And when we do have narrators nowadays who narrate the stories they go along, they do so in very intermittently. Like Into the Woods is a musical that has a narrator who has a character, and he starts out very traditional and he gets more involved in the story. But it would be very interesting to see somebody do something like this nowadays where there's like periodic narration reminders of what's going on, because that's really Shakespearean and nobody does it or really steals that from his plays, because it's very, nowadays we all get it. You know, we're all like, yeah, we know we're watching a story. This is like our 8th story we're consuming today because we binge watch Netflix.
The chorus way back in Greek drama was usually the main force describing what was happening. Like it really early drama, like pre-Aeschylus, would often be just a chorus and then evolved to a chorus and a character speaking against the chorus. So like in Oedipus Rex, our understanding of what is happening in Thebes is like the chorus comes on, tells us everything that's actually happening, and then Jocasta or Oedipus or someone come out and feel really bad.
I guess musicals do that. Like musicals still have ensembles that kind of like, you know, let everyone know what's going on. But it's just, I can't imagine doing, like you guys were saying, scene break scenes where the whole point is just to distract you for a second and be like, so just in case you weren't following along, here's what's going on.
Yeah, I think like choruses, the first one I thought of, because you're mentioning the Greek plays, I was like, oh, like in Disney's Hercules, when the muses come out, because they're the effective narrators of that movie, right? But they tell you stuff that you don't know yet. Like in Zero to Hero, they're like, Hercules is getting really popular and he's getting rich and like now he's a celebrity. But that hadn't happened yet. It's not like they were like, hey, you just watched that, now I'm going to sing about it for 2 minutes. It's like we're progressing the story. And I feel like this doesn't progress the story. It just, it tells you, here's what you saw last time on Seinfeld. Like,
yeah, actually. And we always skip that part, don't we?
Well, yes and no. I mean, there is an extent here to which it formalizes what was maybe implied in the previous scene. Because at the end of the previous one, they're kind of upset that the other is a Montague or Capulet. But in this one, the playwright is telling us, oh, but they don't have time to meet. You know, there is some extent to which it is formalizing the implication of the last scene. I mean, I basically agree with you, but I think there's slightly more foreshadowing than could be presumed.
I think nowadays, if a narrator did what this chorus does, I would assume that there's some crazy meta thing going on where the narrator is a character in the story and has their own reason for doing this. which to me I think
Oh.
speaks to how this trope has changed over time. Because now, if we were to see someone going, "I'm the narrator, I'm telling things you already know," and the audience would be like, "Why would you? There's no point to you doing that. So they must
It's
be
like,
doing it for some other reason."
What's like binge watching on Netflix, where they still include on the last episode recaps.
But that's not
Yeah.
part of the episode, right? That's meant to be. This is
Yeah.
part of the story. Like,
Yeah, I'm thinking
That's-
like the classic Lemony Snicket series of unfortunate events.
oh yeah,
Where the narrator's voice, it adds to the humor and the atmosphere, where they have a
Mm.
personality
Mhm.
and they make little
Mm.
jokes and hint at what's to come in the narrative. Oh, but these poor kids can't catch a break. So I think the function of recap and a little bit of foreshadowing with some humor or some additional entertainment value is still very much a thing.
Like
That
Twilight
reminded me
Zone,
of
man.
Arrested Development.
Oh,
Yeah. Oh
What
man,
is
I
it?
would love to see Romeo and Juliet with Ron Howard playing the chorus.
That's so great. It's funny, like Arrested Development, How I Met Your Mother. All these
Oh my
were, I guess, in Arrested Development, it's the son that's the narrator, like George Michael. Who's
I
the
think
narrator?
it's just the narrator. Like there's a narrator.
Oh, that was supposed to be a person, like one of the
No,
characters.
I actually don't they meet Ron Howard at one point in the later Netflix seasons?
Oh,
So
really?
that
Yeah.
makes things confusing. But
That's interesting. I mean, I'm
But
thinking
How I
like
Met Your
Twilight
Mother,
Zone.
you're right. It is like the main
It is
character.
the dad, right?
Yeah.
Which terrible ending.
Danny
apparently.
Tanner.
oh, that's a good point, Marat. We do use this nowadays for humorous reasons. Like
Yeah.
in How I Met Your Mother, a scene happens, and the narrator goes, "That happened. Am I right?" And then it becomes a much more.
Yeah, or the cutaways in The Office where they do like the documentary interviews about the thing that's happening. So you get
Mm.
some insight into the character's inner thoughts that just add another layer of humor to the scene you're watching.
Well,
Mm.
and I do think there actually is, because we're talking about this under the assumption of an audience that's paying attention. I mean, there for a lot of people, because the theater would be pretty rowdy. I mean, you would have people getting drunk, having side conversations, doing business, notoriously engaging in relations with women of the night, soiled doves.
At the
So the-
theater?
Soiled doves. I've never heard that before.
What does
So
that
there is an actual function of this as well, to be like, hey, if you didn't pay attention to the last act, this is the story.
If you
Now
were
you
to
can pay
focus on the
attention to the
chilling
next
part of
act.
Yeah, if you were scrolling through Facebook while binge watching Netflix, here's what happened last episode.
So you know how there's stories, and in stories things like speed up and slow down, and they slow down so people have time to like gather themselves and see what's going on. Because stories do recaps too, right? Within the scene, characters go, "Did you see what just happened?" And the other character's like, "Yes," and they describe it. This to me feels more like what Logan was describing as like a commercial break, the TV recap, and also, and I keep bringing this up, an excuse for Shakespeare to show off his writing. Because this is very much him just being like, yeah, I can write a chorus. I can bang out like 5 of these. And yeah, maybe it'll rhyme. Maybe it'll be a sonnet. And maybe it'll be even better than everything else I've written. So I think he just loved to really push himself and just constantly keep writing stuff where he's like, I can do it just because my writing's good enough.
Yeah. I mean, it's fair. I think you mentioned a while back about how like the thing that we were missing in old-timey writing was decent editing. And I think that is pretty true. And this is the sort of thing where it's like, if Shakespeare was alive today and wrote Romeo and Juliet, these sorts of things would be cut. And not just for the technology that we have today, but it's just like, why? You don't need to do this. You don't need it. And he's like, but it's so good and awesome. It's like, bro, relax. Like, put it in a book of poems. Then like, we don't need it. But it's the times that he was in.
I think it helps too that it is meant to be fair to Shakespeare. Like Logan was saying, this is meant to be shouted over the raucous crowd at the Globe Theater. So not all of his writing is meant to be studied like separately, because then you see that's kind of like, this is kind of meh. Even for Shakespeare, you're like, yeah, they're hot. and they're into it, and that's really
They're
all he
into
says.
it.
There's a few, like most of his other metaphors and sonnets, they'll be stretched out for many lines, like even Mercurio's speech, like about Queen Mab, that had effort put into it. And this one we get like a throwaway fish reference to fishing, like, and he's like, oh, love is used like 80 times, old desire on deathbed. The metaphors are so much shorter now. It's because he's just like trying to get through it, I think.
Mm.
Yeah, and you know what's true is that I think we talked about this before too, but like people put Shakespeare classics, all kinds of stuff on these pedestals, and they think that it's all very dense, difficult, and boring, and not fun, and like challenging. It's almost like those kinds of people who are like, I've never tried a Brussels sprout, but I know I won't like it. It's like, no, you don't know it because you've never tried it. But they feel like, and because they think that they will hate it, they actually will. Like they'll try one and they'll be like, nope, this is gross. And I think that's the sort of thing with Shakespeare. It's like not all of it is dense and difficult and takes 5 times to read it to understand it. Some of it is actually quite easy. And I think like with this one, it's not difficult, it's not very complicated. It's not bad, like it's not trash or anything.
It's not
but
trash.
It's like not all of Shakespeare is like, a brick wall to get through, even if you're not, well versed.
He was kind of like the Brussels sprouts of his time.
Oh my God.
You know what? I do have something else to say about this. Desire is old when he dies in this, but affection is young. So Shakespeare is saying that there's a difference between the two. Okay, I'll admit I did not actually have something when I said that.